So right, let's get settled up here. So I'm trying some new material. Peacocks. So I was with my 7-year-old boy, and we were on a farm in Chile, and this guy had like 3 peacocks, and it was molting season, so they were dropping their feathers, and just picking up a peacock feather, it's just like, what is going on with peacocks? They're so insanely beautiful. They've got the Bobby Dazzler on the top of their head, kind of fluffing around. And my son was like, oh, check out its butthole. Look at the butt, round the butt. So we're looking at its butt, and it's got these beautiful white feathers, and they've even got the eyeballs on the tips. So we were kind of like mesmerized and blown away by the beauty of peacocks. And my boy was saying, like, how does a peacock even exist? Like, how does a peacock come to be? And the more we thought about it, we're like, oh, well, whatever led to peacocks led to people. And so that kind of essence of peacock is talking out of my mouth right now and looking at me through your eyeballs. And this idea of peacock juice seems to be the best way to describe what MLF do. We kind of tap into the essence and we spray it at people through virtual reality headsets and projectors. So I maybe need to work on the peacock lines. It's in development. So I wanted to start with some of the first project we ever did. So Marshmallow Laser Feast is an artist-led studio, and when we first set up, our intention was to all take low salaries so that we could self-invest in our artworks. And so we started, myself, Barnaby Steel, and Robin McNicholas and Memo Acton, and this was our very first project, which was to tell the history of mobile phones on the Vodafone headset.
Could you press the spacebar? Oh, just looking good.
So we're going back to like 15 years ago.
Oh, it works! Boom!
So these animation pieces are a part of like the making of, and we're about to get to the actual. So these animation pieces are part of the making of. We're about to get to the actual final piece, but in order to brief the sound designer, our normal approach is to make the sounds ourselves. So this is the kind of sound designer's brief for the project, which is about to start. Okay, sound designer brief. Very late night. It's thank you. So right at the beginning we were like, oh, the potential of new technology, projection mapping animations onto the real world. This was kind of an obsession, and for that project we wanted to track the camera in real time, but we didn't really know how to do it. So the next project we got, which was for Sony PlayStation, we used the PlayStation Move controllers to track the camera so that what was projected on the real world matched the camera perspective. So this is that one. So if you look at the top, there's a guy on a ladder holding a projector to do the wings. So it's kind of super lo-fi. It took us about 40 takes to get that final last take. So playing with technology, loving it, creating our own problems. Remember Acton, who was one of the founders, he left at a certain point because it was just way too stressful. And one of the projects that broke the back of him, we're like, Memo, we've sold this gig. It's the launch of the Saatchi & Saatchi Advertising Festival, and we're going to do a drone show with mirrors and laser beams, and the lasers are going to hit the mirrors, and we're going to break the fourth wall, and they're going to come out over the audience and create sonic geometry. So he left shortly after that because there was quite a lot to deal with, but he's a total genius, way more than, he's an artist in his own right, and I miss that guy, but, we're still good friends. So this is that piece, and I think at the end you'll see one of the drones drops early because the motor's burnt out. It was held together with sticky tape. So let's dive into that.
You need not fear the great unknown anymore. For soon all will be revealed.
So the beams were there's all these hungover ad execs, and the beams were so bright, it was like curling their eyebrow lashes. It was so intense on the front row. So after a bit of that, I started to feel like this guy. And I think when you've set up an artist studio, that the idea that you self-invest in your own work creates a trajectory where you have to ask yourself the question of, well, why do I do what I do? And I think to a certain point, I was just so excited about the potential of playing with new technology, I didn't really find the answer to that question. And I was on an overnight flight to Lima, and I had a big sequoia tree on my laptop, and the guy that sat down next to me, an old guy, he leant over and he said, "Oh, the reason this tree is so old is because it breathes so slowly." And then he kind of did this really kind of creepy, like looking me in the eye. And he turned out to be a Tai Chi master, and he was taking Vietnam War veterans to the sequoia forest to do Tai Chi. And it was like a moment in time where I just had children, and he gave me this beautiful little steer. He said, "You should keep this little compass in your pocket, and you get it out when you're trying to work out, orientate yourself in the world to make the big decisions in your life. And this compass is just asking the question, how does what I do affect people and the planet? And if you can just turn it a little bit towards having positive impact, it can make a big difference. And so that really stuck with me, and it really set me off on a trajectory of asking, how can my obsession with technology, collaborating with all these wonderful people, how can I use those skills to create projects that might have a positive impact? And so Richard Feynman, actually Memo put me onto this guy. He's got this wonderful talk here where he says, my friend is an artist, and when he draws a flower, he can see details that I can't see, and maybe like details in the petals and little subtle textures. And so he thinks that he can see a beauty that Richard can't see, but then Richard says, I as a scientist can see details that are unavailable to your eye. So for example, the reason that the flower is red is it's co-evolved in relationship to the eyeball of a pollinator. It asks questions like, does that pollinator have an aesthetic sense like we do? And beyond that, there's more to the flower. There's all the inner workings, the fact that it's powered by sunlight. And basically, he gets to this point where he says that scientific understanding only ever adds to a deeper sense of awe and wonder. It never subtracts. And so that's been like one of the pillars behind our work. And then I had another encounter where I was in a desert, and there was a Bedouin camp, and I needed some power I had some virtual reality with me, actually. I needed power for the VR. So I was setting it all up, and the musician came over, and he said, what's going on with all this technology? What's in the headset? So I started to explain, we're looking at a forest through the eyes of different animals, and I started getting into all the details, and he went like this, shh, and he put his finger on my lips, shh, and he said, tell me, what does an apple taste like? Which is basically, stop talking and show me the experience. But that idea of what does an apple taste like when you try and articulate it with words? The scaffolding of language falls so short of the richness of the sensation. It really struck me that as we start to play with these new technologies that can tickle the senses, the ears, all of the immersive tech that's engaging our senses, you can start to experience dimensions that before could only be described. And so that became like one of these pillars of, how to expand perception through technology to witness these dimensions that we see through the lens of science. So thinking about the relationship of our senses to technology. So to the naked human eyeball, when a horse is galloping, it looks like this. This is how horses were painted from cave paintings until the invention of the camera. So with the frozen moment, for the first time, humans are able to witness how a horse really runs. And probably many people, if you were asked to draw a horse, you might be more familiar with this kind of image from seeing horses in slow motion on TVs or seeing them frozen in motion through photography. And so it's interesting to think how the technology expands our perception and it affects, think of it like a lens. It's a lens through which you see the world. Another example, looking up at the night sky to the naked eye. I mean, in cities it's not so great, but if you're in the right location, the stars are phenomenal. But then through the invention of the telescope, we're able to see dimensions of beauty that are unavailable to our eyeballs. And it's not just that, it's the stories that come back. When you see a nebula in color here, it sits alongside the story that when that star exploded, its enriched guts spewed out the ingredients for life that flowed through all living things. So our ancestry in the stars is here to be seen in these images. Virtual reality. It's my partner Robin. He hates me showing this slide. I'm always sticking it into his decks and hiding it. So we were in a forest in up north, Grisdale Sculpture Park, and we were asked to do a site-specific piece. So the installation was part of a series of artworks for And Festival, and we just started playing with virtual reality, and we were having this idea of, okay, in a way, these eyeballs that you can put on, they could be the eyeballs of a dragonfly. What's it like to put on the head of another organism? And Michael Pollan's got this wonderful quote, which really tickles my fancy. Looking at the world from another species' point of view is a cure for the disease of human self-importance. And so we created this piece in a forest up in Grisdale. I'll show you a little video of it now. I'll talk over the top as well. So we asked the question, what would the forest look like through the eyes of a mosquito, a dragonfly, a frog, and an owl? And it's really interesting because human perception is just one flavor amongst many. And when you see the world through, let's say, a dragonfly, you're seeing ultraviolet, you're seeing infrared. The dragonfly's frame rate of reality is around 300 frames a second. So if you think of our refresh rate, at 24 frames a second, you can watch a film and it appears smooth. And so to a dragonfly at 300 frames a second, that would be a really slow slideshow. So time is not this constant ticking, it's malleable depending on what body you see the world through, what sensory system. With the owl was quite tricky actually. Its eyeballs are cemented into its skull, so if it wants to look left or right, it turns its head, which is why it can almost turn its head 360. But it's got like telephoto vision, so imagine you had 200 millimeter eyeballs, like sticking binoculars on your head. That's the way that it sees the world. It's my dad.
What a show! What a show! Unbelievable! Very clever. Amazing.
I've got a very encouraging dad. So Dad's the guinea pig. We stick him in, and I'm like, Dad's in, get the cameras. So he'll be coming back later. On his back there, he's got a sub pack, and so when Dad was on a log, so you kind of go on a journey through the food chain, and at a certain point, he's on a log, and you're looking around, and then the moment that you take off, the sub pack activates between your shoulder blades. So those little tickles are really where it's at. It's like, then you have this sense, oh, I'm flying. You went up to the top of the canopy. And what was quite interesting is people hung around for ages after the experience. Oh, Janice, I think we were down, we were a frog, weren't we, down in the swamp bit there, and then went up over there, we up that tree, went up that tree. And it's interesting, like, what happens when you take the headset off? How can a virtual experience affect the way you experience the real world? And I think that this is the kind of essence. We're like, oh, there's something in this technology as a way of expanding perception and seeing the world in a way that's enriched. So along that theme of expanding perception, we did a project quite recently where we're exploring sonar. And so it's really interesting to think, what does an ocean look like through the eyes of a whale? And there's this relationship between sound and the clarity of what you see. So if you can imagine almost like having a flashlight that you only see when you make the sound. So it echoes out, and when it comes back, they're feeling it through their skin. So it's a really interesting way to explore Umwelt, which is the way that a whale perceives the world. Trees, we do like a bit of trees. So while we were in Grisdale Forest, we were thinking, what would it be like to be a tree? And if you think about it, there's this, it's like time is this bridge between human perception and tree time, right? There's this kind of like, you can't really see a tree as a living being unless you explore this idea of accelerating time. Lovely quote here. So the duration of the beat of a hummingbird's wing is as concealed to our sensory organs as is the drifting of the continents. So for this project, the technology had moved on a little bit. We've got backpack PCs. So suddenly you can roller skate through the virtual forest.
I'm going to go back to that.
Urson's got a breath sensor right in front of his mouth and a heart rate monitor. And he's also got an avatar, which I'll describe in a moment. So this piece that we made is called We Live in an Ocean of Air. It was at the Saatchi Gallery. I'll just let this play through, and then we can hear from my mum and dad. So here's swirling air particles. So when you breathe out, you see your out breath, and you can swirl it and interact with it. It's a big fluid dynamic system. Your out breath actually flows into the plants, and it starts to describe their inner structures. And at the end of the experience, all 7 people that share it together, they rise up to the canopy, and there's rivers of oxygen that flow into their bodies, and you can see the internal cardiovascular system of all the different participants. It's quite funny because people end up holding hands with strangers. They think they're holding hands with like the person they came with. It gets kind of confusing. So it was quite interesting that when you're meeting people and you don't have a skin, like race, gender, everything's transparent. You're just like a branching being. It's very magic mushroomy, sort of branching being, ferreting around in the canopy of a tree. But I think for this one, there were lots of little details that we discovered. So when we were doing the tests, we set up the tree just by coincidence by an air conditioning unit. And I was like, oh, I was putting my head into the tree, like through the sapwood, and I could feel the wind on my face. And I thought, oh, it's interesting. The visuals were creating that sensation in my skin. And then I realized there was an aircon unit. So that led to this brain fart that made it really hard to tour. We did 40 fans in the ceiling that were in sync with the animation. So there would be, for example, a branch that you passed through that would have a gust of wind attached to it. And we made a column of air married up to where the tree was, and it had a sappy scent in it. So as you pushed your head through the bark, the kind of particles part, you can see the water flowing through the inner structures. You felt it on your face, and you smelt the sap. So,
it does involve all your
Mum
senses.
and Dad.
And I felt nourished. It's as if you're being nourished by the tree, and you see the interaction between yourself and the tree. It's incredibly moving to really understand the sort of the process of collaboration between you and nature.
We are completely at one with it. You are at one with it. You're not the boss, you're part of it.
Absolutely.
It's just quite wonderful. It's terrific.
Terrific. Yeah, I lucked out with Mum and Dad. They are like, they're so encouraging. So, yes. So then when we're designing these experiences, we actually put this together after we made the experience, but it became a kind of template for how we're thinking about these projects. Because you're tickling multiple senses, you need to start thinking about storytelling in terms of haptics, the emotional arc, the olfactory narrative, and the soundscape. And so how all those layers piece together is really the key ingredients, because there's no traditional storytelling in these kind of experiences. It's all to do with exploration and engaging people with the pleasure of finding things out, exploring, seeing unseen dimensions. And then I chucked these slides in, and there's probably some technical people here, but we're basically thinking of ecosystem simulations. So when we're designing these projects, it's all done in V4, and there's lots of real-time tools, but we've basically been building up the same tool sets, which can be used to describe most things. So it's branching structures and fluid dynamics. And so this is kind of a little insight into the backbone there. So our obsession with trees has evolved. We did a piece recently at Kew Garden, and this was a great commission for us, because like, the dream is to work with scientists. In a way, I was thinking of them like, they're kind of like these slugs munching away into like the lettuce of reality. They're like, ooh, in these little dark corners, and they're witnessing stuff that no one else has ever seen. No one's ever tasted that before. And they leave behind this juicy slug trail, and that's where like we kind of fly in and we're like, ooh, this is tasty. And we kind of like yum up all that juice and then squirt it at people through headsets. So this was paradise. Like the people there are so passionate, and they've munched into such tiny little details. We got to get all of their scientific insights. And one of the fascinating things about an oak tree is that it's a home to over 2,300 different species that all live in relationship to the tree. So this idea of even the word tree creates the idea of an individual. So then when you peer through the bark, that gives way to the idea that actually a tree is more like a river estuary than anything static. And then you're like, well, what's flowing through? So you've got water flowing through root structures up into the leaves, and through transpiration, it's making moisture and cooling the air. You've also got that water is journeying up to meet photons in photosynthesis. And we start to think about, okay, what would that be like as a first-person journey? Think of this as a window into a virtual world, and you could start as a raindrop, and you could go down, bounce off a few leaves, hit the soil, get sucked into a mycelial network, and then where the mycelium, there's a special type of mycelium called mycorrhizal, and they have this like chemical conversation with the tip of the root, so they're kind of squirting juice at each other. Ooh, and the tree's like, oh yeah, it's a good one. I want some of what you've got. And so it softens its root, and there's this kind of interspecies intercourse where the mycelium like grows in and penetrates the root, and they get woven into relationship, and the mycelium gets glucose from photosynthesis, and it's also feeding water and nutrients to the root. So in fact, a lot of those nutrients are from the leaves that fall off and get recycled. So there's this beautiful network of relationships. So imagine that you're going on that journey. You've been sucked up, going on the journey, you're going up through almost like a vertical elevator, up the bark, out through a branch, and then when you get to the leaf, imagine that leaf has been scanned with the world's most powerful electron microscope. And the way that they do this is they put a leaf in resin and they slice it into tiny thin slices. They scan each slice and then they assemble it back together. So you can have like a structure as big as this with way more detail than this. Think of St. Paul's Cathedral, but it's all cellular structures, cellular symmetries. So you could be going on this journey, maybe there's a few of you, like water molecules, and then at a certain point within the chloroplast, you're meeting a photon that's going to split you in half. And I was thinking, the way that that's described is that the photon smears into a probability wave because it has to basically arrive at the energy center in the leaf with all of its power without losing any power. So it kind of does this quantum smearing. So you could be there, and it's like it's this a little bit like the beauty of light, the caustics, but it's smearing out, and it's very beautiful. Oh yeah, it's gonna touch me. And then because you're in VR, you could have one of those Dyson hand dryers just in front of their face. You like wheel it in. So then it goes whoosh, and you get the hot air, and it splits you in half. And the oxygen goes whee. If you go on the path of oxygen, you go into the human body. Or if you want to go on the path of glucose, you could go into food, eat yourself, and it keeps going. I got carried away there. I'm running out of time. Let's see. So.
Let people engage with it. That's all good. Yeah. Okay.
So this is it in context. We're so lucky to be able to do these projects because situating it next to the actual tree creates a dialogue. So when people look at the digital twin, I should have muted this video. When you see the digital next to the real, it creates a discussion because it's suddenly a reflection of how you see that tree. So we're really interested not in the digital as a replacement or as some kind of like substitute. It's about the relationship to add more, to reveal more layers of beauty and understanding for the real tree. So when we're doing all of this, we get really obsessed with the details because the beauty is in the details. And so here's James Bully. He's a wonderful composer, and he's got hydrophones in the soil to get the movement of water through root structures, piezo microphones on leaves, contact microphones. So we build up a whole palette of sounds. We're also using, this is ground-penetrating radar. You can see the sort of system on the right there, and that gives you the root structures, or simplification of root structures. We're also using CT scanners. We didn't use this in the project in the end because we're constantly running out of money. We're pushing as hard as we can until someone says stop. So we've got some really good data. And on the back of the structure, these are all the species. So this is 2,300 species that live in relationship to a tree. And I think it's the more you look at anything, you realize that there's no boundaries between one thing and another. In fact, the only real way to understand things is to look at the relationships, and what you find is that everything is woven into everything else. So the reviews came in. Let's see what this one said. Right, the toilets need more regular cleaning checks. Several didn't even flush today. Some had water and wee all over the cubicle floor. So then I thought, ooh, we could do a rebrand. Mushrooms. We clearly like mushrooms. Let me see what we're doing for time. Maybe we can talk about mushrooms at the bar. Love those mushrooms. one experience we want to make, which I've been dreaming about for years, is you can imagine like in the school gym, you're like, come on kids, the Marshmallow guys have set up a little VR thing for you. And they come in, oh, yeah, what's this, sir? Put the headset on. They're in a forest, and they're like, oh, yeah, okay, so what's going on? I've got to lie down, have I? They lie down, and then time starts to accelerate, so like the day-night cycle, whoosh, woof, 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 woof. And you know when you're filming a car wheel, and there's a certain point where it stops going forwards or backwards and kind of goes, that's tree time. So day-night cycle is like, and then suddenly mushrooms start flying through their chest, and they realize that they're dying. But it's not actually that scary. It's a musical experience. Bacterial blooms. It's an organ classic, and there's like the maggots are. Okay, we can make it quite beautiful with our particle systems, but the maggots are like, oh, and then turn into flies, and it's like a bath bong. You are a bath bong, and you kind of unspool into the forest. It's like sneaking magic mushrooms into the school omelette, but anyway, we're looking for money for that, so anyone who's interested, come see me. Right, so moving on. Obsessed with haptics. I think that the skin, playing with the sensitivity of the skin is wild. Like, even this morning, I was kind of like, oh, I had a little bit of sugar on my lip, and you can feel 1 grain of sugar on your lips. It's wild how, like, the resolution of our reality and the skin as an organ for sensing. So we designed this piece for a spa in Germany called Wund. It's part of Thermogroup. And so it's a big sort of haptic lily pad. In the middle is a scent dispersal system. There's 32 speakers around the edge, and you look up into the projection. You've got some photos of it here. And because it's a spa, we're like, oh, let's like situate these things in water. So you come in, there's mirrors and water. But the idea for this piece, in fact, I've got a little video of it, was not to represent a forest as it is, but to explore a forest at dimensions that you can't perceive. So we accelerated the day-night cycle, so 24 hours is compressed to 5 minutes. There's a scientific paper about how the movement of wind through leaves creates this kind of hypnotic effect, and when you slow that down, you can enhance your connection to the kind of fluid dynamic movement. So you can think of it as essentially a way to unspool your senses, or to like really decompress. Also, there's this relationship of birdsong to being calm, because when there's an absence of birdsong, there's not, in nature, like how our senses have evolved, if there's an absence of birdsong, it normally means that there's a threat. So it's really, there's a lot of science around this, so hearing birdsong basically lowers blood pressure. I'm going to whiz on a little bit. My wife was having a child, so I didn't get to go to the Amazon. But there was a lovely story here, because James, who was super detailed obsessed, he was there in the forest, and he's putting piezo microphones on leaves. And he's like, oh, Urson, each leaf is like a differently tensioned drum skin, awaiting the impact of a raindrop. And so he'd put the microphones on, but then he'd have to wait for a drop. And it's like, at some point, someone had to say, no, James, stop doing that. We've got more work to do. So I was going to try a little experiment here. I want everyone just to close your eyes and feel your pulse. So just put your hands maybe on your wrist and feel your pulse. Now try and imagine the shape of blood flow through your heart. So the pattern that drives that pulse. Just try and picture it in your mind's eye. Okay, now open your eyes. So the Fraunhofer Institute in Germany did this wonderful study where they did a sort of time-lapse of blood flow through the heart, and they generated this data set. So this is actually based on real data of how blood flow moves through the heart. And it led to this project. We're like, oh, what if you could walk around the human body at the scale of a forest and just explore the journey of oxygen? You could even just like breathe yourself into your own body and just like a river, just glide along that stream and see where it leads. So we did this project. It took maybe 4 years of planning and trying to get the data, because a lot of the medical side moves slowly. But yeah, in the end, it translated to a multi-screen sort of epic experience, but also the virtual reality part is the core. And yeah, and you go on this journey of breath. through hearts, lungs, up into the brain. And there's a certain moment where you rise up out of the body, that I think I can show you here. There's a moment where you rise up out of the body, and it's a kind of biological overview effect. The body's about 100 foot long, and that's the first time where you can see everything connected from head to toe. So one of the books that really inspired me of late is Existence, A Story by David Hinton. And he's got this wonderful way of talking about all of existence, using a Chinese landscape painting as a metaphor. So the practice was to, you set up on your cliff top, and you start with the empty canvas, nothing, and from nothing something emerges. And as you apply the ink to the canvas, you're describing mountains, rocks, trees, and yourself, all rendered from the same pigment. So it's basically the idea that you're inseparable from everything else. And drawing yourself from the third person is part of that disconnect from the first person view to this view where you see yourself as inseparable from everything else. And I kind of feel like that's maybe the essence of what we're doing. I think scientific observation is peering into this existence tissue, and it's describing a world where there's no separation between one thing and another. And I think if you start to see the world that way, then beyond the boundary of your skin, self-care extends into the care of ecosystems, into the care of forests, rivers. So on this idea, we started to look at NASA data sets. Just let this play for a moment. So photosynthesis is something that's going on a cellular level, and NASA quite recently have released some insane data sets, and one of them is CO2 concentrations in the atmosphere. And so we got hold of these data sets, and you can see photosynthesis from space. So what you're seeing on the forest here with the pulsing is the impact of the day-night cycle. So actually at nighttime, the trees, through the process of respiration, are releasing more CO2. In the daytime, they absorb more. So that's what you're seeing in this pulse here. And so I guess the way that, I can see I've got 18 seconds left. Yeah, okay, I'm getting close to the end. I'm not going to waffle on too much about that. But basically, we've got a new series of works, and these pieces come together from like the global perspective to the cellular perspective in order to describe this existence tissue and a kind of the reality of how everything is woven together. I want to touch briefly on a project that I'm just planning with Oxford University. So they've got all these amazing scientists, and we were lucky to get a Bloomberg fellowship. So I've kind of got my store out, and I'm ready to suckle. I'm like, okay, who have we got? And there's all these people who are studying the brain. And I asked one of them, what does consciousness look like as a pattern? And he was like, murmurations. Murmurations of starlings is a really good way of describing how thought and consciousness propagate as a pattern through the brain. And that kind of led to this idea of how you can look at patterns in nature and then apply them to the patterns of perception. So, for example, when you have an experience, it creates a branching structure. That's a memory. And when you recall the memory, it's like a little flash flood that comes back down and actually changes the shape of the memory. So each time you recall a memory, it deforms slightly. And there's a great scientific paper on this, how the memories that you recall the most become most deformed. It asks questions. I got these references, but I was thinking, okay, so wait. If everything I experience is filtered through the lasagna layers of all my past experiences, then, where's it? Yeah, what does the lasagna look like? And is a trauma like a lump of mozzarella? So there's lots of questions, but I'm going to end on a quote by Terence McKenna here. So, nature is not our enemy to be raped and conquered. Nature is ourselves to be cherished and explored. And I've just been collecting some of these references that speak to that. Thank you.